All right, we've been talking about the progression and regression models in our previous video. So now we're going to jump into how to actually use it in practice and make sure it's actually effective. So in the last video, we covered the SAID principle, skill acquisitions and deficiencies, strength deficiencies and dysfunction. Just being able to identify them as really important times that we can apply the progression regression models to different stages and allow us to choose the right exercise in that progression regression model based on what's going on. So our goal today is just to take you through how to practically do that and what to think about and exactly what our progression regression model is to allow you to apply it into the gym straight away and give you a systemized approach to actually executing this stuff. So you're seeing what I'm seeing, which is the Stc Fit progression regression model table. So you can see at the top there, we've got tier 1, which is the goal movement. So in this context, typically we're talking about like a squat, bench, deadlift, maybe an overhead press is going to be the primary movement for most of this conversation. Tier 2, we've got a modified exercise. Tier 3 all the way down to 8. You've also got there tier X.1, which is essentially in between each of those. So you've got tier 1 and then 2 steps between to tier 2, 2 steps between, and so on and so on. So these talk about slowing down, using tempo, etc., and then external tactile support. So a quick rundown. The goal movement is the specific movement that you're trying to target, obviously the most complex variant of that pattern. Then we've got a modify exercise. So something's wrong, and this means we need to modify that exercise to reduce the skill demand, basically make the exercise easier. So a good example would be a barbell squat to a safety bar squat. Move the load. For a change in the pattern, force a change in the pattern by moving the load to a different place inside or outside of the center of mass, depending on what outcome you're trying to achieve. So we're going to maybe go for like a front squat in this case when we're talking about the safety bar, and then we could move to a front squat with a kettlebell or goblet squat or something like that. Next up, we're going to remove a layer of input. So we're going to split the body in half typically, or sometimes it's in sides, and just think about, okay, removing a little bit of that complexity. So for a squat, we might remove the upper body and just focus on the lower body. For example, we might use a split squat. Provide external stability is the next step. So giving the lifter something to hold on to, pretty much. There's a few machines that kind of fall into this external stability kind of place as well. Things like hack squats and even like a Smith machine hack squat, something like that. That's got external stability that gives you more control, but you're not necessarily forced into a position, which is the next progression, forced into a position. So best done with the machine that controls where the lifter is going to be positioned in space and controls their range of motion, how that's going to look and where they're moving in space. Next is to isolate. So we're isolating a specific joint and or muscle group, focus on a specific area of the body. So just to catch up with those, we went from the split squat, external stability, maybe went to a hack squat, provide forced positioning, maybe we're in a leg press, and then isolate when maybe we're looking at a leg extension. So typically that's how people look at programming anyway. So thinking of things this way, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now we're going to talk about applying the progression regression model to your programming. Tam's going to bring up this graphic again. You can see we've got exercises there, and then we've got the progression regression model that you might use in each scenario. So if you want to take a screenshot or something and you can save that and think about how you could apply that into your own training, really, really useful. We'll actually drop the link to the article so you can have it on quick reference with these two graphics as well. So if you want to jump there and you can see it and come back to this as well for the practical application side of it. Really important though, this isn't the progression regression model, right? The part that we showed you earlier is the steps and the system of how to do it. This is just an example of one way you might apply it, okay? You can, exercise selection is very, very broad, and depending again on that SAID principle and what kind of breakdown you're targeting and why you're actually regressing that exercise. So the next step now is to actually test yourself and see where you're at as a coach and how effectively you're using a progression regression model, if at all. Most people are in some way, shape or form, just maybe not conscious about it and being deliberate enough, which obviously leaves rooms for holes and mistakes. So with those two graphics, grab a program that you've made for a client and imagine that they've got some difficulties and start making these changes. So apply this progressive regression model to it based on what you think is there. So if someone's having trouble with squats, what's it going to look like over the entire program? You're not just going to change one exercise. You're going to have to consider what's happening everywhere else in the program as well. Now I want you guys to run through a little bit of a checklist. Does your program continuously and consciously adhere to the said principle? Do you know why every element of that program is in there? Can you identify skill and strength deficiencies? Can you identify and work around dysfunction and pain with the help of an allied health professional? And do you have the progression regression model sufficient to cover all movement patterns you use in your programming? Vertical push pull and horizontal pull is not shown in this article, so it might be a good idea to actually use those as an example. Go through, like, okay, if I've got a military press, how do I run the progression regression model for that? I've got a bent over row. I've got a pull up. How do I actually apply the progression regression model in that to just show yourself that you've got the knowledge and you can practically apply this system and then be able to take it forwards into your programming. If you can confidently answer all 4 of those, you're in a really, really good spot. You're probably ahead of most, like 99% of the population of personal trainers, because you've consciously got thought going into the design and customization of your program and personalizing it to the individual that you're working with to get the maximum outcomes, which is really what we're here to do, is get our clients results. So to go a little bit deeper into this, check out episode 129 of the Stc Fit Learning Podcast. We'll have the link to the YouTube video and the online podcast on Spotify and the other apps in the comments below. Jump on, give it a listen. We talk about all the practical side of being a good personal trainer, including being able to assess movement and also apply the progression regression model inside of that and become very, very good at shifting along the spectrum and making your program suit the person you're working with for maximal outcomes. Thanks very much. Give us a like and a subscribe. We'll see you next time.